Right, so to start with, then, what is Power BI? Obviously, you've probably had a lot of people talking about it, but what actually is it? So it is a piece of software made by Microsoft for business intelligence. That is what the BI is. So many of you might have heard of Tableau before as a comparable bit of software. You might have used business objects, SAP business objects before, another very similar piece of software. But Power BI is Microsoft's version of that. It was generally designed as to be a primary rival for Tableau. Tableau exploded in popularity very, very quickly, and then Power BI sort of caught up with it and overtook it over time. And what it does is it lets you view very beautiful, handsome, smart charts like this in a way that's easy for the user to digest. Very, as you can see here, it's all interactive. I can click on any part of this page, and generally speaking, it will contextually change what I've clicked on elsewhere on the page. And it processes data and displays the data in a way which, generally speaking, is quite easy to get to grips with. Commonly, I think, especially when I first started getting into this kind of career path, I started off using Excel for everything because I used to work for Lloyds Bank. It was obviously very, very corporate. Everything was Excel-based reports that we used to take screenshots of and put into PowerPoint presentations and things like that. And obviously, now that technology has advanced a bit further than that, we don't need to work like that anymore. We could use tools like this to make it much easier for our users to understand our data and to display information that's relevant to them, rather than huge tables of information that might not be relevant, or graphs that might need some caveats, some understanding behind them. Whereas Power BI can do most of these things for you. It's also much better at handling larger data sets as well. So where tools like Excel get much slower as they're processing huge amounts of data sets or doing lots and lots of calculations, Power BI can handle basically an unlimited data size depending on the way that you use it. There's ways of setting up so that it can handle tables with literally billions of rows of information, and it'll still work if you set it up for that purpose specifically, which I'll get onto a little bit later on. But this is an example of a Power BI dashboard that we use in Southampton. So this is taken from our data observatory, which is publicly available information. So I can pop a link to this in the chat later on. In fact, I'll show you exactly how I get to it in the first video, so you should see what it looks like. So this is an example of a dashboard that's been embedded into a website. So normally we publish under something called the Power BI service, because in my team, we use a lot of our dashboards internally. But this one has been obviously embedded into a website, which is run by some of the people in my wider department. And this specifically is about cost of living. So we can see here we've got a front page of our dashboard with some buttons on it. And the one I'm going to use as my example is, let's go into this one. I think I heard her saying she's going out. I think they've got a meeting to go. So we can see here this is about food insecurity and economic insecurity across Southampton. These are all the different districts in Southampton. And we can see here in this very simple chart here, generally, if you've got more money, you're a bit more secure about how much food you can afford, which is, obviously what you'd expect. But Power BI obviously lets us display this information in multiple different ways on the page. So we've got some very smart maps. If we hover over a certain section on the map, it's going to give us more information in that tooltip. So we can see that one that I've just hovered over there. Hopefully you can see that is the rank 95th. And we can also click on certain elements of the page and it will highlight the information that I've clicked on. So this LSOA here, 009F, if I click on it, it zooms in to exactly where that is and shows me specifically in the information about their food insecurity, their economic security. And the graph that in the top right now is reduced just to show me that single data point. So obviously where these things in Excel, you wouldn't really get that. You just get a bunch of pages, a bunch of charts on a page that could be very busy and showing loads of information at once. Here we've got the ability to sort of slice and dice our data on the move and just see the bits we want to see. So an example of how I use that in children's social care specifically is maybe where I've got some dashboards that show caseload information for the entirety of children's social care, every single social worker. But obviously when the social worker opens up the dashboard, they don't want to see the hundreds of peers that they work with and how many cases they've got. They just want to see themselves. So we've got ways of where they can either pick themselves from a drop down, or we've got other pages where it automatically knows who's logged into their computer. So it just immediately shows them who is viewing the page so they can see their own cases straight away. and that information's just, you know, instantly available to them without them needing to filter a huge table of information. They can just see it straight away by clicking some buttons and slices and stuff. So this is sort of an example of what you know, a very simple dashboard looks like. So what I'm going to be showing you today is PowerBI Desktop, which is the application you would normally use to design a Power BI dashboard in. Don't worry if you haven't got it yet. If you can get your IT department to whitelist it, it's completely free. You might need a certain kind of license to be able to publish things, but I'm pretty sure even with the free version, you can build a dashboard and do whatever you like with it. So I'm just going to open that up now.
Yeah, I was just going to jump in and say that the free version, you can share dashboards, but it's generally to the internet. So I don't know about every place, but generally we go for Pro because we can share secure links. Yeah, and you can make sure that the people viewing your dashboard are the right people.
Yeah, I think maybe at the end when I've published, or if I whip up something really basic and publish it, and then I can sort of demo a little bit about how the permissions and stuff works if we've got time for that. Right, so yeah, this is Power BI Desktop, this application. So here we get this little splash page that just shows us recent updates to the bit of software. You know, obviously, if you use it all the time, it might be relevant. Like me and my colleagues have a meeting regularly where we discuss like what new features have been added and how we can use them. A lot of people in my team use the map features quite a lot, and there's some really interesting stuff they're always doing with like geolocational data all the time. So often we go through these and see what new things there are. But I'm going to talk through a little bit about how to make something really simple. So this page we're looking at now is this like a canvas on the report view. So there's three buttons on the left up here. We've got the report view, the data view, and the model view. And I'll talk to you specifically what these are in a little bit, but the report view is basically where we're going to design a really basic dashboard. This is where you would place your graphs and text boxes and buttons and other things like that. So obviously, first of all, we need to get some data in here in the first place. So I think in the email that was sent out previously, there were some links to some stuff online for what data you could potentially use. So I think for the purposes of this demonstration, I'm going to use something called AdventureWorks, which is like a Microsoft fake data set where it's about a company that I think sells bicycle parts or something. But you could obviously use any kind of data source for this whatsoever. It's incredibly versatile. That's one of the perks of Power BI, is that lets you use basically anything. You could get data directly from the web and an API. You could, what we most commonly use is a SQL server. So me and Nicholas would use SQL Server databases for pretty much all of this stuff, but you could totally use an Excel spreadsheet or a CSV file or something if you wanted to. You can get stuff from an API in like JSON or whatever you like. So I will show you how to get data. So this little button at the top left here, get data, is normally where I would start. Obviously there's some like shortcut buttons up here, but to demonstrate like the kind of things that you can get, if I go get data and then I go more, you're able to see all of the hundreds of different places it allows you to actually interpret information from. So you've got really obvious stuff here like Excel, you've got text files, which are obviously pretty much anything will let you export stuff into a CSV these days. And then we've got all these different types of SQL databases and Amazon Redshift databases and stuff like that, data lakes, Azure storage, all of it. So there's loads of different things in here. And you can, and you can put stuff directly into it from an API or SharePoint as well, if you've got web-based stuff. It's got very good integration with SharePoint generally as well. So if you guys use a lot of SharePoint storage and stuff, it can tell you information like how many people are accessing what kinds of files or uploading what things to forms and things like that straight from SharePoint. So it's really easy to do that. But yeah, for this example, I'm going to get stuff from an Excel workbook. So I'm going to click connect. And then obviously it's going to ask me to navigate to a spreadsheet. So I'm going to use this one, AdventureWorks Sales. So this is a version of AdventureWorks I got from GitHub, which is a spreadsheet. The default version of AdventureWorks is a backup of a SQL database or something, which I don't think it'll let you import that unless it was restored into an actual SQL database. So yeah, I think the link was shared out if anyone wanted to practice doing this in their end. So yeah, I'm going to open this AdventureWorks Sales, and then it's going to ask me what tabs I want to take from this spreadsheet in a minute. All right, cool. So here we've got all of the tabs in the spreadsheet. I'm not going to take all of them just for the example, just for the purpose of the demonstration. I'm going to take sales. Let's take product. Let's take sales order. let's take date as well. So we can see if we click on one of these tables here, so if this was a SQL database we were looking at, we would see tables here rather than tabs. But because it's a spreadsheet, it's automatically detected like what's in column 1 and row 1 and where the data stops. So if, again, for that purpose, like using a proper database system is probably better than using Excel, because you can't have like gaps in your data. Then it'll just go down and a certain number of rows. So here we can see in this, so I'm going to expand this a little bit. We can see a sample of the information that's in this. Yeah, so we've got here, we've got some serial numbers, we've got some names of products, some colors of the product, we've got a model, so we've got subcategories, and we've got category of the product. So we can see like this product table here is a list of unique products that the bike company is selling. And then if we go into sales, we can see this is a list of sales of those products that have happened. And we've got some IDs here, which we can use to link up one table to the other. And I'm going to say a little bit more about how we can use related tables and stuff in a minute as well. So I'm going to go ahead and load these tables in. So when I click load, what it's doing is taking essentially a copy of that information from that spreadsheet and loading it into a data layer into this file. So the way I'm importing these is essentially it's storing this information in here. So if I was to go and delete my spreadsheet, the data would still be in this Power BI dashboard, but it would never be able to be updated again, obviously, because there's no data source anymore. Once it's connected, I can then refresh this dashboard and it will try and fetch the latest information again from that spreadsheet and put it into this dashboard. So if I had a page full of charts and graphs exactly how I wanted it to be, we could have someone else updating that spreadsheet all the time. Whenever I open this and click refresh, it's going to pull the latest information again. When you publish the dashboard, you can set that to be automated, so it just automatically refreshes the data every morning or something, which is how most people would have their dashboard set up. So in my team, I think 8 o'clock every morning, our dashboards automatically get refreshed based on the information in our SQL server, and those dashboards are the file this creates, which has been published to the web, will only be as accurate as to the last time it was refreshed in here, but the one published in our web version will always be accurate from the last time it was refreshed on the server, which is 8 in the morning.
Yeah, I was just going to jump in, Ruben, and say the way working is for an analyst fundamentally different to what maybe how you used to work. So people used to, let's say, do a weekly report. They'd get their Excel spreadsheet, they get their data, they would pivot it, tidy it up, etc., send an email out. With Power BI, there's more of an initial setup in building your report, but then once you have it set up with the gateway, you just give people a link and off it goes. So it's more initial setup, and then furthermore it should just work, or it might send an email to the person depending on your license. But yeah, it makes life so much easier, because as an analyst you can move on from producing a report to go and produce another report, or to produce more detailed reports, whereas you're always in a holding pattern when you're doing weekly reports, because you've got to allocate time to do them each week.
Yeah, absolutely. It makes it much easier to, if you need to amend the report as well. So let's say I made a dashboard and so I published it, and a manager saw it and was like, oh, can you also add this information in? It makes it much easier to change it as well, rather than in Excel I might have to redesign a lot of what I've done before, whereas in here it's like, 99% of the time it's already going to be in my data set anyway. I might have to just tweak how it looks a little bit, and 99% of the work's already done.
Yeah.
Right, so here I've imported my my 4 tables. I've got date, which has got some date information in it. I've got product, which has got information about the products that we've got. I've got sales, which is a list of sales, and I don't think I meant to bring in sales order, but we've got sales order now. And obviously this information here, we can see the names of the columns that are in these tables, but we can't see what information is actually in those columns. And to see these tables and exactly what's in them, we're going to switch from the report view to the data view over here. So the data view keeps the same layout over here. We can switch between our different tables, but now we can see the actual content of those tables. So, and we can see it's loaded 1,461 rows from this date table. Let's go to the sales one. Let's go get more information in it. Yeah, cool. So here we've got a bunch of different serial numbers about what product it is and what customer it is and that kind of stuff. We've got the date that the order was placed. We've got the date that the thing was shipped. We've got information about pricing. And all of this stuff just it seems to be like an integer, like a number. It's not formatted as a currency or anything like that, which isn't ideal, but we can tweak that a little bit later on. So for now, let's just make a really basic chart and plot some stuff on. Will be a good one today. Let's have a look at the product one.
I was going to say, when you do your visuals, if you don't believe what your visuals tell you, the data sheet view is great, because what you could do, you know, if you've filtered something on a certain date on a certain parameter and you don't believe the result you're seeing, go to the data sheet view, use the drop downs like you would a filter in Excel, and recreate the same thing and see it as a spreadsheet, and it just reassures you.
Yeah, absolutely. So if I use the product one as an example, I'm going to go to this visualizations pane here. So a visualization is basically Power BI's word for a chart. It's it might be a bar graph, it might be a map, or it might be a card. A card is like a single data point that you can put down. So if it was like a count, like a head count or something, or I just want to see a big number in a box, then I'd use a card. So for argument's sake here, let's just use a pie chart because it's really simple. So if I click on pie chart, then it creates me this blank visual over here, where it says here, select or drag fields to populate this visual. If you want, you can also drag them out as well. But yeah, so here we've got this blank visual here. If we click on our blank visual, we can see here it's asking us for some different data fields. So it wants us to put a legend, it wants us to put some values, to put some details for these things and some tooltips. We don't need all of these things. I think the only one we really need is values. So I'm just going to drag one of these things here. Let's drag category on. Why not? So at the moment, what this has done is made a 100% pie graph of our 397 categories, but because we haven't given it anything to split them down by, it's just put it into one big circle. So we're going to need some way of also like slicing these. So if I put category in again up here, it's now going to break down all of the categories by the total number of items in that category. So this table here, being that it is a list of all the products that we sell, we should have a unique row for every single product. So we're never going to have a duplicate. So this isn't going to show us how many products we sold. It's going to show us how many products we have. So here, for example, in our pie chart, we have 189 components, which I'm assuming are like bike frames and stuff and wheels and tires and things. We've got 125 different bikes. We've got 48 items of clothing and 35 different accessories for sale. So literally in seconds, I've stuck this stuff into a little box and it's given me a pie chart to show me the breakdown of all the things that we sell. So very, very simple to do. If I was, like I said earlier on, if I was to go and edit that spreadsheet, save it, and then refresh this dashboard, if I'd added any new products in or taken any products away, then this would reflect instantly. So you can sort of imagine this is like the front end of our display, whereas that spreadsheet is like the back end. It's like our database always storing that information. Again, you probably want to use something like SQL instead of Excel for that, but you get the idea. We can also convert this visual to a different one simply by just clicking on a different visual. We've got this one selected, and it will try and do its best to try and put these same things into the same categories. So if I was to click on the donut, because it's exactly the same kind of graph, it's going to just straight away works exactly the same way. If I was to try and put it into something like a line graph, it probably isn't going to work too great. Yeah, see now it's trying to do the same information, but it's kind of come out where we've got a number of bikes by, in a line, which doesn't really mean anything because these aren't something you'd measure like over time or anything like that. So you get the point. So here we can just move our fields around into any sort of set we like. And what will be a good example to show you next, I suppose. Let's go back into here again. Something we can also do with these categories as well is we can stack them one on top of another to see what it would look like if we were to use, let's use our subcategory, pop that in there as well. And then let's use our products as well. So here I've put category, subcategory, and product. And let's see exactly what that is in the data. I've seen this before, so I know exactly how it works. But so here we've got the category is our highest level. This is our components, our bikes, our accessories, things like that. And then down from that, we've got the type of component that it is. So here it's bike frames. Some of these are mountain bike frames. Some of them are road bike frames. And then the lowest level is the model. This is the exact thing we're trying to sell. So now in our chart, I can use these buttons here to go to the next level in the hierarchy. And now it's looking at exactly the same data again, but by subcategory. So we can see all of our different types of bikes. I can do it again to see every single product. And this is obviously, this looks crazy. You'd never use this in a normal chart because there's just too many things going on. But you can see how simple it is for me to drill down through the different levels of information to show the different elements that make up our data over here. So let's talk a little bit about the model view. That would probably be a good logical next step. So at the moment, I've added in more than one table. I've got our product table we've been looking at the moment, but I've also added in this date table. I've added in this sales table as well. And we can see in our data, we've got these serial numbers here, these keys, which you could consider to be like a primary key in a SQL database or something. And we can probably see these same keys again over here. So we should have product key in our sales data should match the product key in our product data. So for example, if we sell item 258 in our sales table, sale item 258 in here should be whatever item 258 is here. So it would be a black road frame. So to tell Power BI that these things are related, in our data model, which is this tab over here, we can see our tables and we can see how they relate to each other. So this is the basics of like a relational database management system, in the same way that in a SQL database, you might want to say, I've got a table of people and I've got a table of meetings, and I want to know which person attended that meeting. I need something to say, person number 5 was in that meeting. So in the meeting table, I'd need something to say, oh yeah, the attendee was person 5. In my person table, their ID number 5 might also have other information in it about that person, like their name and their age and their, you know, their postcode or something. So the way that I'm going to relate these tables together is by creating a relationship, and that's what these things are here. So if I double click on this little line here, we can see we've got a relationship that's been created between our sales table and our product table. The type of relationship is a many-to-one relationship. So what that means is that in our sales table, we have many sales, but in our product table, they relate to one product. So we've got the product table that contains a unique list of products, but those products could appear multiple times in our sales table. So hopefully that makes sense. This is a quite a fundamental concept when it comes to relating data together. Hopefully some of you are familiar with that, but it's okay if you're not. Generally, all it means is you've just got a serial number that relates two different tables together. And yeah, the two common ones you'd normally use are a many-to-one relationship or a one-to-many relationship, same thing, just the way around, or a one-to-one relationship. So a one-to-one relationship would be where you've got a unique list of things in one table that only appear once in another table. So an example might be, I've got a list of people that I only want to see, you know, like I got a list of all users in a system, and each of them have a unique ID number. But then I also might have a list of people that have ever ordered a recycling bin to their council or something. I don't want to see how many times they've ordered a bin. I want to know people that have ordered a bin. And therefore, in each table, each person should only appear one time. That would be a one-to-one relationship. Doesn't necessarily mean that the same people will be in both. It just means that one person won't be in one twice. Hopefully that makes sense. Plenty more reading, you could probably do that online, but yeah, so.
I mean, the other thing I'd say is I think a lot of people use VLOOKUPs in Excel.
That's an excellent way.
In a rudimentary way, this is doing a VLOOKUP, because what you're doing is saying, based on this, get me this data from this table using the same criteria. So it will take some, particularly those people less familiar with data databases, it will take a bit of time to get used to the concepts, but it's worth doing a Google on joins. left outer inner joins, just to give Microsoft dumb it down in Power BI to an extent, but it will just get you more familiar. And the idea is to encourage good data practice and not to have spreadsheets and spreadsheets full of multiple columns with duplicated data.
Yeah, absolutely. Like you can see here as well, like where I've got my central table in my schema here is my sales table, which is obviously the list of things that I have sold. Most other tables that we're going to bring into this are probably going to connect to this in some way, because this will be the one that's got all of our different serial numbers in it. You can see there's like a key for resellers. I think that was one of the other tabs I chose not to bring in, so we could see like who is reselling our items that are made in our bicycle factory. But all of it generally will relate to this core table in the middle here. And this is a type of thing called a star schema, which is a common way of displaying data in a data model. The reason we need this is because without the relationship between these two tables, we're not able to say what product has been purchased. We can say that product 258 has been sold, but we'll never be able to show us what product 258 is unless there's a relationship between these tables, because the data is in this table that tells us what the product is. The serial numbers in this table. So all we'll be able to say is we sold, 150 of 258. We won't be able to say that 258 is a black road bike frame. So I'll demonstrate that here. So here we've only got data in there from one table. But let's say I get rid of the count of the category. Let's say I no longer care how many products we own. I want to see how many products we've sold. So let's go into our sales table and let's get sales amount. So hopefully that should be a financial value. So straight away, yeah, we can see here it's in the millions. So this is a boatload of money. So here we've got the same categories, the same information we had before with our category, our subcategory, and our product. And we can see which things are sold for the most amount. So in total, regardless of time, we have sold $94 million probably of bike parts, and we can drill down through this information in the same way we did before to see what kind of bikes that they are. And somewhere in this road bikes one will be item 258 in this wacko big list of stuff. But without that relationship between those two tables, Power BI isn't going to know what that product is, because there's the bit that joins them together is this product key and this product key, the same column in two different tables. So hopefully that makes some sense. A really good point of being able to show the relationship here actually will be using the date table here, and we'll add something with a time element in it. So if I go back to my model view again, we can see that this date table isn't connected to anything at the moment, and that's probably because we've got a column in here called date, and we've got a bunch of columns in here related to date, like the date. There's the due date, there was a sales date somewhere, there was a shipping date, but there's nothing in here with the same name. So Power BI hasn't said, oh, well, that must be the same thing then, because they've got an identical name. Whereas if you do have two columns of the same name, it's going to assume they've got the same thing in there, especially if they've got the same data type. It's going to try and intuit that those things are related and try and join them together. So obviously, if you've got a table that has a bunch of data in and you've named the column something, don't name something else the same thing in a different table, because it's going to try and think they're related a lot of the time, and it might not necessarily be. So you got to be really specific when you name any columns. Don't call something just ID in a table and then call it ID in every other table if those things aren't actually related, because it's probably going to try and think those IDs are related when they're not. So you can see here they've called it product key, so you might call it product ID or something like that, or person ID or whatever. So let's have a look at our date table here. We can see we've got some stuff that's formatted nice and neatly as dates. We've got some stuff that's formatted not as dates whatsoever. It's just a great big gobbledygook number. So this is obviously the year and the month and the day appended together. We've got some stuff in there about financial years and other things like that. So we need to see which of these things is also in our sales data. So I go over to the sales tab. We can see here we do not have the date in here. The date is not something which is recorded in here in its nice, neat format, but we do have the date key, which is, so we've got one here, we've got the order date key, we've got the due date key, and we've got the shipping date key. So let's say, just for example, argument's sake, we want to see when the thing was ordered. We want to know when they're placing their orders. So we need to create a relationship between our order date key, which is that number I said that's been concatenated together, the year, the month, and the day. We need to create a relationship between the order date and the actual date table. Otherwise, there's going to be no correlation between those two things. And when we try and say, oh yeah, I want to plot these on a chart to show us all of the years, and neatly be able to see when things were ordered, it's just going to have this number as like an integer. It's not going to know that that should be a date. So you could, I guess, go through the rigmarole of unconcatenating it back into a date again if you wanted to, but obviously this data set's been set up in such a way that you can just nice and neatly connect to one of these keys. So we're going to say here that, where is it? Order date key and date key are the same. So to do that, to create a relationship between one and the other, we just pick one up and we drop it on the other one. And it's going to try and create cardinality, which means how are these things related? It's going to try and do that automatically. So you can see here, it's created a one, because we've got a big one over here, to many, which is our asterisk. It's created a one-to-many relationship between these tables. So here we've got our date table here, which contains one of each date uniquely. We've got our sales table that could contain any number of infinite dates from infinite number of hypothetical sales. Doesn't matter how many there are. It could not be in there at all. It could be in there a billion times. Doesn't really matter. All we need to know is we've got one date uniquely in here. We've got at least one of those dates measured at least once in our sales table. So now when we go back to our reporting view over here, we can let's do a line graph. That'd be nice and easy, right? Oh, whoops, I just replaced my other one. Yeah, we got little undo buttons up here. So if you make a little bloop like that, you can just undo it again. So let's add a line graph in. Let's shrink this thing down for a little bit. There we go. Let's make this bad boy nice and big. Right, so let's put on here, let's have the date along the x-axis on the bottom. And let's have our sales along the top. And that looks hideous, doesn't it? Let's break it down a little bit more by, let's put our category in there again. So let's put our category into the legend. I think that's the right place. Yeah, there we go. So what we've done here, we've created a line graph, and you can see here now that we've connected the relationship between our dates table and our sales table, it knows now, because these things are related by the date key, that along the bottom it's intuited that we want to see the dates, right? We've got our January 2019, we've got July 2019. It's a bit all over the place, but we've got the dates in there. And we can see over here, it's automatically created something called a hierarchy. So you can create a hierarchy from any things that are related. So a good example is with dates, because obviously we know that a month is part of a quarter, and a quarter is part of a year, and days make up months, days make up weeks, etc., etc. We can use these things in a hierarchy so that we can drill down, which basically means like to step into that information and go one level lower, to make this information look a bit less like it's, because at the moment it's showing this on a day-by-day basis, I think, so we can see this crazy line that looks like a histogram or something all over the place. It doesn't really show us much information at all, because we can see here they've got good days and they've got bad days, but that doesn't really tell us any information whatsoever. So if we, I think we want to use this one. Oh yeah, up, that's right. Yeah, thank you. So we're going to drill up instead of down, because we're already at the bottom of the chain. We're already in the day. We want to go up from there. So we're going to go up to month. Now we can see a little bit clearer what the story is. And because I've added this category into the legend, it's broken the category down into these different lines. If I was to delete the category, it's no longer going to be analyzing this data by the category. So it's just going to show us all the sales in one big line. So if I just get rid of that, now it's just everything. So we're no longer caring what kind of thing's been sold. It's just how much have you sold. So let's pop that back in there so we can see a bit clearer. You don't necessarily have to use dates to make a hierarchy either. You can use a hierarchy for other types of information as well. So I guess I could have made one for my category, my subcategory, and my product, because those things are hierarchical, right? At the bottom of the list, we've got our model or whatever. The next one up, we've got our subcategory, and at the top level, we've got our category. You could also do it for like, I've used it in the past for like managerial structure. So if you had a table of users and you had in another column next to that, like what's the ID number of their manager, then you could say from there, of all of the managers, whose team is performing the best, and then you'd be able to see that in one one data point rather than having to see every single employee amongst all teams. You could roll it up to see, well, whose manager is that, and then roll it up again, who is those managers, and then you can see which wider department is performing the best if you were working on like a sales kind of environment or something. So here we can see our stuff over time. Again, we can drill up again to see what this is like. I think this is annually now. Calling, yeah. So we can see the information over time now. Because we've got that relationship between the two tables, and we can use these controls here to drill up and down. Oh yeah, I think it's this one. Yeah, cool. So that's an example of how you can make some very simple, quick, and easy visuals, and the interactivity between them should be automated. So if I click on one of these, you can see now, because I've clicked on bikes, it's shrinking this visual down to only show me bikes. If I click on it again, it goes back to show me everything. Now, obviously, because I'm doing this in the developer part of Power BI, I'm doing this in the Power BI Desktop program that you use to make these things. When I change things in here, I think if I publish it, it would keep all the stuff exactly as I published it. But in the web version, once you published it, when you refresh the page, it basically just resets everything back to the start again. So if you publish this information, you're basically risk-free that your users can break this in any way. So once you've published it, once it's on the website, if I show you back on this one again, I can go, click on all this random stuff. I can click on like 3 of them at once with a shift, I think. There we go. So now I'm looking at multiple things at the same time. This isn't going to be saved in any way. You just refresh it, it goes back to the start. So there's no problem with anyone accidentally saving over your dashboard or anything, because this dashboard here is in the tool we're using to build it. Once it's published, it's published. It's completely separated from this file in every way. You could then continue to update this file and publish over the top of it if you wanted to, if you need to make changes iteratively over time. Right, what other things should I show you? Let's look at filters next. So over here, we've got this pane over here. Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, just thought it's a good time to thank you so far. Is this a good time to pause and ask people if they've got any questions or anything?
That's a great idea. Yeah.
So far, we'll move on to slices.
Yeah, before I get too far ahead. Yeah, that's a good point. Does anyone want me to show them anything else? Again,
I was just thinking, Ruben, while you're on there, you might want to show just some trend lines using the analytics function.
Yeah, I haven't really used the trend lines in here, to be fair, many times.
We can park that, and I can show them another day.
Yeah, sure.
It only tends to work with the line graphs, doesn't it? So I was just thinking while you were there.
Yeah, so I've used spark lines in the tables before, but I don't think I've ever used just.
So if you click on the line graph and then go to the third icon on the visualization tab.
Yep.
You then have a list of options there. And you can play around it. Yeah, you can just do add.
So is that average between all categories? Is it?
Yeah. If you take the legend off, maybe show it on the overall total. Yeah.
That's right. The third one, and then
third one. Yeah, and then just do add line of very flat,
cool.
amazing flat. That trend line.
Oh yeah, and it's dynamic. So if I move it around and stuff, then it changes. Yeah, cool.
That's just quite useful. It will only work with what's in the visual. So sometimes it's not a true trend, but it's more of a guide. It doesn't seem to be moving much, does it? But you can play. There's a number of options within there that generally only work with the line graphs. You can put percentile lines on there, and you can do median line, min max, etc. They're quite useful for guides. So I mean, I used to use it for assessing whether someone had given us the right sales data, because if there's an average, and that average is £50,000 a week, and they give you 10,000, then obviously you can see there's probably discrepancy. So it's more, I think, for front-end users than any scientific function. There's also some forecasting bits which I might take them through next time we do a session.
Yeah, cool.
Because I've used them now and again.
Great, thanks, Nick. So before Ruben moves on to looking at slices, anyone got any questions or Anything I'd like Rueben to go back over? No, can't see any hands. Okay, great.
I'm not sure I believe that.
I think
no-
that the stuff between relating tables I think is very complicated. And then when I first started doing this kind of stuff, it took a long time for me to understand like what it all means and why it's important. So yeah, if that was a bit confusing, I'd highly recommend doing some YouTube homework, have a little look at some tutorial videos and stuff, and see if you can get to grips with it, because it is very important.
I think Jacob
actually,
has his
Jacob.
hand up.
Yeah, hi. Just a quick one on when you're joining up the date table, when you were joining up the date table to the sales table, if you were, so obviously you'd want to alias that date table out to join it to other dates as well, potentially. Would you alias it, or would you just keep joining it? How does it work in here?
So
I'm just thinking, in the world of business objects, you used to alias the table and just create extra copies of the date table.
Oh yeah, you don't need to do that. You only need to put it in there once. So
Okay.
So things that are connected through this chain of relationships should be connected all the way through from one end to the other. So if I was to add in, I don't even know, let's say I had another type of sale or another kind of thing that was regularly happening. Like let's say I had meetings, right? The people who work with this bike company are going to meet bike purchasers in important sales pitches or something, and there's going to be a date that thing occurred. I can easily just join it to this date table again. You have any number of connections to this table, but if it was connected to another thing in here, so let's say I had like the meeting was about a specific product. So in my hypothetical meetings table, I had a product number, and I attached the product number to this product table, because this table would be connected to the product table, and the product table is connected to the list table, and the sales table, and the sales table connected to the date table. It should follow all the way through and still recognize that the date in here is related to the dates of the things that happened in here. It should. But yeah, you can, if it isn't, then you can just quickly drag your date from one to another. You can have any number of connections from one table to another table. You shouldn't need to duplicate any tables.
But you wouldn't rejoin that date table to the sales table again, say if you wanted to create a visualization based on not the order date, based on, let's say, I can't see in that table, but based on another date that's in that, because there are several dates, like maybe the due date, for example.
You can create multiple joins, and there is
you
for the DAX, you can use relationship, and you can turn joins on and off.
Yeah, you can do it in here as well, can't you, by choosing which one you want to be the active one.
Yeah.
But I think because I'm not sure if it would, because we've got the connection here where this was obviously going to have our unique list of dates in. I don't know if it would, if I was to use a different date other than the order date key. Let's see what will happen. Actually, let me just dump one out and see what happens.
Would you actually alternate between two different dates? I mean, that's, and also you could store alternative dates and classifications in the date table. So one of the examples I would give is, I had a Power BI report where I used to flick between the status as of now and as of month end. And the way I did that was actually to create two filters within the date table that said, well, this is as of now, and this is as of the end of the month. So it really depends what you're trying to do. It's also, I don't think it's a great idea to have multiple date tables, because Power BI uses time intelligence functions to do year on year, month on month, rolling averages, etc. And I think multiple tables, you can do it, and there are reasons why you might want to do it. But
you mentioned about using related in DAX, right? So DAX is a programming language. It's basically tantamount to using a formula in Excel. It's the Power BI version of formulas. The basics of it are relatively simple, but you can write things that are really complicated. And one of the functions in there is literally what you said. It's related, right? You can say, I want this specific field to be related to another field. So if you wanted to slice this by a different order date without, or just a different date without replacing the join, you could say with some DAX, you could say I want it to be related to a different date and then plot it into
Right.
this graph.
Yeah.
But the initial one would not be affected. You'd still be connected to this.
Yeah.
Over
Jacob, is there any reason why you'd want to use different dates for different
Well,
reasons?
I'm just thinking, yeah, I'm just thinking that sales table contains many dates, doesn't it? Many different types of date. So
Yeah.
you could, like you've done here, you've done it by order date, but you might want another graph on your dashboard that was showing the data by a different date.
Yeah, let's see what happens.
Does that make sense?
I think if I
Yeah.
try and plot, it might be just because how this data is laid out is a bit odd because it's got like multiple different types of data in the same sale. But like if I
Yeah.
was to drag one of these keys in, so let's say I did the shipping date, which I'm assuming is going to be the date that it was shipped, because that is just an integer. It's not going to know what I'm talking about when I try and bring it in there. So let's do sales and the Y again. Yeah, that doesn't look right at all, does it? Because this is an integer, it's got no idea. So yeah, I guess.
If it was a date, it'd be fine.
Yeah.
Yeah. Not. Yeah. It's not
Yeah,
a number.
I'm just thinking because, like, it's sort of standard database design, isn't it, to have one date table, and then
Yeah.
if you're writing like a SQL query, you want to join to that date table several times, you just create aliases, don't you, in your code?
Yeah.
Of that table.
I mean, you could still join on date. You could use a different date field in the facts table to show the data for that. Yeah, it depends on the use case.
I think because they've used these date keys in this data set specifically, if these were actual dates, like normal human being dates, then we could just drag the date from the sales table into the x-axis of a chart. We could drag multiple dates in, and it would have a different, it would have different lines for related to the thing that happened. So I think it's just because of the way that they've laid this out in Microsoft sample data. But yeah. I don't think you would need to join it multiple times. I'd advise against doing that personally, unless there was no other option. But
okay,
there's functions in here as well for marking a table as the date table. I generally don't tend to do that because it seems to not really be necessary. But you can see I can mark a table as the official date table. So I'm assuming if you had multiple date tables in here, maybe that's what that function specifically is for. I tend to not bother with that and just use one primary one. You can. You can get a block of code in a programming language called M mashup, which is like another more complicated language that people use in Power BI that generates an entire date table for you for like every single day, week, and month in the last 5 years or something, just by pasting in a block of code, and that's normally what most people do. Which I can talk a little bit about later on if we've got some time.
Thanks for your answer.
Yeah, no problem.
Thanks, Jacob.
Right.
Sorry, just before we move on, we've got a hand up from Andre.
Yeah, sorry about this. Just another question. So in your joins, you can't actually put a translation link. So you couldn't put in to say between that join between the dates table and the sales table, you couldn't put something to say, this integer is a YMD, year, month, date, to put it through as part of that join functionality. You can't put that in. Is it literally you just take the field as it is between the two?
Yeah, but you can change what is actually in that column really easily in Power BI.
I meant within the join. So you're not amending the tables, but within the join, it knows that an integer is a YMD as part of that link. Some database systems can do that. Is this one unable to do that in terms of the link? Is it too simple?
I don't know. As far as I know, it'll interpret dates in any normal date format, but if it's like this where it's just an integer, I don't think it will.
Because also what I'm also thinking of is other things you might want to convert between keys, because they aren't identical in the purest sense, but they are the same data items via translation.
Yeah, bear in mind as well, this isn't a relationship between two dates, it's a relationship between two integers, isn't it? So
yeah. Okay, thanks very much.
The other thing I was going to say on that is if you were going to convert it to a date, you'd be doing that further back in Power BI. We're very much on the front end of Power BI, the presentation layer, and you'd probably do that further back in transform data or in SQL before you brought the data in in the
That's part
first
of the
Yeah.
initial preparation. So
Yeah,
it'll
yeah.
be
I
consistent
think me and
throughout
Nick
the-
both agree it's
Yeah.
better to have your data in the format you
I
want it first, so that
I think
PowerBI
we
doesn't
all
have
would
to
agree
do
with
any-
that.
Yeah, yeah.
Thanks very
I think-
much. Cheers.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, you can do a lot of that data manipulation in here, and if I've got time at the end, I'll show you a bit about how we can do that as well. I think that was one of the last categories I had on my list of things to talk about. But because of when the part of the refresh, if I click refresh now, it's going to try and, it's going to go back to my spreadsheet again, and it's going to see what information's in there. It's after it's done that refresh, as the last stage of that, it's going to apply all the transformations that I've added. So if I'm doing those in Power BI, it significantly adds to the amount of processing time that's going on. Whereas if all those changes are in my data in the first place, then it takes literally seconds. So I'd recommend having the data in the place you want it to be to begin with. But I suppose that's general good advice for a database in general, rather than a Power BI specific thing. Right. Any other questions, or shall I go on to filters and slicers?
No,
So
can't see more hands.
do people want to put questions in the chat as and when they come to them?
Yeah, that's a good idea.
And then we can, at the end, we
pick
can
'em
go
up at the
through
end,
some.
can't we?
Yeah.
That's a good idea.
Okay, cool. And we've got about an hour left. Sweet. So, filters. Filters are very simple. It's pretty much what you'd expect. You can use this filters pane over here to filter on whatever you'd like. So let's say I wanted to only see, that's a bad example actually, because that's going to show me all Aprils in all years. Let's look at the categories again. Let me add that one back in. Categories into legend. There we go. So we've got our 4 categories. And we can see in here categories in the filter up here. We can click on this little arrow here to expand what kind of things we're filtering on. We can either do very simple filtering, like I want to just see everything that is a bike, and that's going to filter just this visual to show me just things that are bike related. Now, obviously, as well, you can notice it says up here filters on this visual. We can also drag these things down into filters on this page or filters on all pages. So a reason why you might use this is, let's say you're making a dashboard that has where the column has many different companies' data in it, or many different, maybe you're making one just for the clothing department or something, and you've got all these other different types of component in there. You could really simply just drop the categories into filters at all pages and then just stick that on clothing, and then it's going to filter everything down to the clothing section everywhere in the dashboard permanently until you change that again. And you can also hide these so they're not visible to people in the Power BI service, like in the website, by clicking this little button here. So if I set this to be clothing, I lock it, and then I set the little eye to be hidden, then this is going to be fixed for everyone who looks at this dashboard, and I don't think there'll be any way of them actually taking it off again. You'd have to go and take it off and then upload the dashboard again. So that's a very quick and easy way of like preventing people from seeing information, though really there are proper like row level security measures in here you can use if you really want to protect your data from certain people you might not want to be able to see it. But yeah, it's a very quick example. You can filter your information down here, and these things by default are available to the people who are viewing your dashboard if they're viewing it in the Power BI service, so they can play around with these filters themselves, filter stuff down to certain colleagues or certain teams or whatever it is they want to see. You can also change them to be advanced filter types as well. So if we go into advanced filtering, then we can do really, really basic logic here, like yeah, things are not blank, or things start with a certain phrase. So maybe the subcategory isn't a great example for that, but maybe I could do like why did the product, let's find something that's going to have the word bike in it or something, or frame, because that's something I could really easily filter on. Let me go back to the data one. Product is, yeah, let's do model. Model is frame. So then we got model from here. I'm going to put it into filter all pages. We're going to do advanced filtering. Yeah, let's do contains frame, apply. And that should have filtered the whole thing just to things that are frame related. So you can see they're all components. Now I draw another one. I'll draw on the other one, don't I? Yeah, this one. So here I can see now it's only looking at frames, even though my data set is untouched and is looking at everything. On the report view, I filtered it to only show me things that are frame related. I can still interact with these like normal. It's going to tweak the other graphs like normal, but I can very, very quickly hunt down the specific piece of information I want to look at. A slicer is very similar, except a slicer is a lot more visually accessible. It works more like a button or a drop down So if I go into, which one is it? This one. So it works a bit like a visual. I've got my slicer button here. This one's absolutely gigantic, so I'm going to shrink this down a little bit. And you can see here it's asking for a field. So a slicer only has one input, and it's literally saying, what do I want to slice the data by? So for example, let's do that same thing. Let's do a subcategory this time. We'll pop that in our field. Now here we can see we've got all the different types of products that exist. This one's going to be very long, but you can change the format of it. I think it's on this button. Oh no, okay, this thing is moved.
It might move to the paintbrush, second one on the visualizations.
This one, yeah, cool.
Yeah,
Slices. There we go. Yeah, sweet. So we can change this to other different types of stuff. A drop down's probably the best one you want, because then straight away we can see in here we want, yeah, and then we get everything in here, and the nice little drop down. We can make that nice and tidy like that. I think there might be some of these in the example I was showing earlier on. Or maybe not on this page, actually. Never mind. So yeah, we've got some categories here we can pick what we want to see. So let's see all these different types of stuff. And as before, it's going to automatically update our other visuals to reflect that stuff. I think we can control click to select more than one thing at one time if we want to, or we can force this to only accept one value. So there should be something in here somewhere that says
selection. I think you just there.
Is it?
Go back to visual. And then slices.
Oh yeah, selection. There we go. Yeah. So at the moment it's set to multi-select with control, but if we turn that off, then I don't think it's going to let me control click them anymore. Okay, maybe it is. Right.
You can't select all.
Oh yeah. Okay, maybe that's why then.
Do single select at the top.
Oh yeah. Now it's that's what I was looking for. Cool. So now it's like a radio button rather than a tick box, so I can do one at a time. But then obviously if I get rid of that, then we've got we can select multiple ones, or we've simply here with this. Let me expand this a little bit. There we go. Show select all option. Now at the top there should be a thing which is just select everything. But obviously by default we could turn that off, and then selecting nothing is the same as selecting everything now, because we see at the top we've got all. If we select something now, it's bib shorts. So yeah, that's a quick demo on slicers. Now you can also make slicers look all sorts of different ways. So keep looking in the wrong place. So we can change this to a tile. Now it's going to show all these things in a whacking great big grid. Now, because we've got so many things in it, this might not be the best thing to use for the best category to use for a slicer. I normally use the tile one for things like yes and no, or overdue or not, those kind of things, because if we want to see at a glance which things are problems, then we can click on like the yes button, and then it's going to show us all the things that are overdue, or we click on the no button and all the things that aren't overdue. Simple as that. So
I think this is where, as an analyst, you want to take a common sense approach to how you lay stuff out. And if you've got more than 4 categories there, then you're not going to be tidy.
Yeah, I probably want to use the drop down.
Yeah, you got all that real estate that you're trying to show the report on, so you go for the drop down instead.
Yeah. If you guys are going to be bringing the Power BI into your service as well, or if you've used anything like Tableau or anything in the past, it would be a really good idea to have a template that your teams all use to make their dashboards from, to keep things consistent across your department. So in Southampton, we have a template dashboard that we try and keep updated with like the newest features. It has the same design, uses the same icons, so that whenever anyone creates a new dashboard, anyone in our department always uses that same dashboard to begin with to set the framework out for what they're trying to do. And then you keep the same color scheme, you keep the same kind of shapes of all the buttons, and then your users are going to have more or less the same experience when they use any dashboard. I think that the whole goal of this is so that your users can have like a relatively seamless and easy to understand data experience. They're obviously most of the time not going to be data handlers in their job. Like a social worker might not have much experience with Excel, let alone a lot of experience with something like Power BI. So they're not going to have to worry about what all these features can and can't do. They're going to want to see the answer more or less immediately, or maybe click a couple of buttons and have it shown to them very, very quickly. So I'd recommend trying to keep things uniform between the work that you're doing, trying to keep your dashboards looking more or less the same. And then everyone's going to have more or less the same amount of time with it.
Yeah, I was going to say, on top of having a uniform dashboard, what we do is we store it in the same place. So all the icons, local authority icons, the same fonts, the same theme. So you've got the same set of colours, and and then, as you said, there's the same layout. The other thing with slicers, I was going to say, is because slicers take up real estate, if you can slice the report by using something like the pie chart, don't use a slicer. If there's something visual that you can use to slice the data, don't use a slicer because it takes up space.
Yeah, so like what it means is like here where we've got this pie chart showing the subcategory, me having a slicer for a subcategory and the pie chart for subcategory, it's kind of pointless. Like this slicer is redundant because I can just click on the thing I want to click on and it's going to do exactly the same thing the subcategory does. So this is really a waste of space. But yeah, and having space for your charts is much more important than having space for your buttons. If you want to have your information displayed in such a way that's nice and bright and visual, you probably don't want to have like loads of little tiny charts all crammed in the corner so you can make space for more buttons. You probably want to just have, like, less is more, I think, and a lot of this kind of stuff. So
yeah, I mean, it might be worth showing the relative date slicer.
Yeah,
to
that's a
then
good one.
show
Let me...
how something that a slicer that is useful. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So here I've put in the date into this slicer here, and at the moment, obviously, the date is in a drop down. Now this is completely useless. No one is going to want to scroll through, well, this is like 5 years of dates to try and find the dates they want. So in our slicer settings, we can change the slicer to be a relative date setting. Now this is commonly known as a date picker. You might have used it if you've done any web development. It will show us relevant to a certain, related to a certain time, what kind of date we want to see. So for example, if I put we want to see stuff in this month. Okay, there's been nothing this month. That was a bad example. Let's do last year. Hopefully there's been stuff in the last. All right, I guess this data is kind of old. Last 3 years, there we go. So I've flicked it back to the last 3 years, and this now should have shrunk the data to just show us stuff within the last 3 years. Now, if I was to publish my dashboard and leave the last 3 years in there published in this slicer, it's going to maintain these same dates. So over time, it's going to keep reflecting these dates whenever the dashboard is updated, i.e. it will always show you the last 3 years from today. So you don't need to change this. If you saved it like this, the default view in this page will be to show the last 3 years worth of information. So you consider that in Excel. If you're going to do that same thing, you might have to do some conditional if statements on everything to be like, if it's before this date and after this date on every single field, whereas now we just have a slicer we stick once in the page and we just say, oh yeah, I want to see it in the last year, and the whole thing's done straight away. So this is a really easy way of showing rolling information, especially if you might have like a weekly meeting where you look at what the position was since the previous week. You can just stick this thing to be the last 1 week, and then it will just show you what the data is the previous week. Easy as that, very simple. And if you ever use any time sensitive stuff in here, there's like similar things for time. It's going to be in, maybe if any of you have a call center that you might monitor in your office, and this could be the kind of thing you might want to use for how many calls there have been in the last hour or something. And similarly as well, we can do like before a certain time or between two dates, for example. If you had like you wanted to look at a specific snapshot in time, maybe there was some kind of like a material event that happened between a certain amount of time, you might want to see what the state of play was like in that time. Then you could easily pop it in a slicer and do it like that. The same kind of controls are in the date filter as well, but the slicer is a lot more user friendly and easy to use for because it's on your dashboard and it's got a nice little date picker button and stuff. So yeah, I recommend using that. So what other things was I going to show? Let's have a look at buttons and visual stuff. So in addition to just sticking charts and graphs onto or visualizations, I should say, onto our report view, we've also got loads of different controls for adding visual things like buttons and text boxes. So if we go back to the example one I showed you earlier on, you can see here that my colleagues have added things like a link to the data observatory on here. They've added some buttons that take us back to the previous page, back to the home page, and back to a help page that shows us how to use this dashboard. We've got buttons at the bottom that take us to show information about metadata for clinical indices. We've got all sorts of interactivity on this page, which basically makes it function like a web page without you needing to know any HTML or any CSS or any JavaScript or anything like that. we've got nice, easy to use buttons that we can navigate around our page in. So how do we create these things? So it's very, very simple. I say it's very simple, and now I can't actually remember where the button is. It's over here somewhere, isn't it? Oh, here it is. It wasn't insert, it was right the first time, right? So yeah, we've got in the insert button up here, we've got text box, right, which is obviously what it sounds like it is. We can color this, make it look like however we like. I often use these for banners and things like that. Sometimes I use shapes as well, and then you can write over the top of a shape. But let's have a little look at buttons. So here by default, we've got some really simple information here, like a reset button or a help button or a Q&A button. And many of these things, I think, automatically will do the function you want them to do. So if I have this reset button here, maybe it doesn't do it by default. So we've got this like reset button here. Currently, it does nothing. But if I set this to have an action on, and I can pick the action I want. So let's have it, let's have it go to, let's do a page navigation one. At the moment, I've only got one page, so let's create a new page. Down the bottom here, I've got these tabs. This is just the same as a sheet in Excel, basically. I can make another one, and now it's like a whole new page. So let's take our pie chart. Let's just cut that with Control X, and we're going to paste it with Control V over here. And then we've got this button over here. Maybe I picked the wrong thing for a button that takes us to another page, but here I've got page navigation. I can change the destination to be page 2. And then when it's published, this button will work when you just click on it. But because we're in the developer mode and we don't want to be accidentally clicking on this button at all times, you can see it says control click here to follow the link. When this is published, it will just be a left click and it won't come out with that pop-up. So we control click, takes us straight to that page. So when we do that, it's going to leave everything on this page exactly as it is when we leave. So if I was to put some like, I don't know, nonsense filters and stuff on here, there we go. I've changed it all around a little bit. If I click on this button again, it takes us back. The original page is still going to be like it was when I left. So you can get around that. If you wanted to have buttons that navigate around and they maintain the state of when, of what you want that page to look like. So let's say when I go to the food insecurity versus economic insecurity page, the things I was clicking on earlier on to filter this all down haven't remained clicked on. It's not still zooming in on whatever LSOA I clicked on before. And the reason for that is because a bookmark has been created and attached to that button. So a bookmark maintains the state of all of the slices and fields and selections that you made at the time when you create the bookmark. So we can do that by going into the bookmarks pane, which is up here somewhere. Bookmarks. You can see here we've currently got no bookmarks. Let me create a new one here. Yeah, we'll just leave it as bookmark 1. And then let's change this action on this button to be bookmark and then bookmark 1. So now when I click on this bookmark, it's going to take us to bookmark 1, which is exactly what the page looks like now. So on these graphs, if I change some stuff, I change some random dates around, whatever. Now if I click on bookmark 1, it's resetting everything back to the point when I created bookmark 1. So you could use that to navigate between pages, but maintain the state that you want your user to see when they click the button. So we commonly use that for our users so they can navigate between pages on a dashboard without needing to reset anything. Because otherwise, if they were to change a bunch of filters on a page, they navigate to a different page, when they go back to this page again, it's going to retain all the weird stuff they clicked on, and it won't reset itself unless you tell the system to reset itself. So we usually use bookmarks to navigate around pages, but you might not always want to do that. It depends on the the look and feel of your dashboard and how you want to set it up. But yeah, that's a very quick demo on what you can do with buttons and things. Obviously, we can have shapes, we can have images in here. So we have like an icon library. We've got all sorts of icons, and we usually use our icons as buttons. So we use that by creating a button and then hiding it behind an image, and then making the image be clicked through. So you can click directly onto the button, and it takes you wherever you want. But you can make it look like whatever you like.
The other thing you can do is you can put 4 graphs on top of each other, put buttons at the top of the graphs, and make it look like as the buttons changing the graph.
Yeah.
Whereas
yeah.
actually what it's doing is it's changing the selection order between the graphs. It's hiding 3 of them and showing 1 on the top, and so on.
Yeah, so you can
Combination of
create a
buttons or
bookmark for each
bookmarks.
of the way you want it to look, and then you're using the bookmarks to change the entire page. But really, all it's doing is just changing the order of stuff on the same page, so you can use that to make like you said before, to save real estate, right? You don't want a page to be cluttered. So I guess you could have done that on this one here. We could have had both of these be one giant map and then had a button that just switches between which map is the one showing if you wanted to. But obviously the point here is to be able to compare sections. Maybe that won't be too relevant, but yeah, you see the point. All about saving space, really, making it look nice and neat within the space you've got available to you. Right, so the next thing I put down. Yeah, go ahead.
So just on real estate, obviously you can change the page size. Many people do, but I've on different occasions I've had to do it. If you just click on the page anywhere and then go to that's the one.
Yeah,
And,
so no, I think at the moment I've got it set to be. It should be like stretched, shouldn't it? So it'll always fit the page, but I can fix it to be
custom.
So
Go back, custom.
Oh yeah, that's it.
And
yeah.
then,
Yeah.
Do that by 42880.
Let's make it some really weird shape. So if I knew that everyone in my department uses like a specific type of monitor or something, or maybe I was making, because another thing PowerBI is very good at is being able to be utilized between different types of device. So dashboards will work on a smartphone totally fine. They might look a bit weird, but they should, if you've got them in like a normal kind of shape, they should fit on like a widthways tablet or something and look totally normal. All the interactivity should work just as normal. So yeah, if you knew that everyone was using a specific size device or something, maybe you would want to set it to be like this. So you're building for a canvas with a specific idea in mind. Whereas I use a pretty widescreen monitor when I work, and I think most of my colleagues probably do as well. So when we're working stuff, I think most of our dashboards are fixed to be like a smaller size. Maybe they might be like A4 horizontal size or something, because we know that most of our social workers are working on the move, but they're using like a tiny little laptop or like a notebook kind of thing or something. So a lot of ours won't be extra large, because it's going to mean that when the user opens it, everything's going to look tiny because we built it to be the width of our monitor, if that makes sense. So yeah, again, to change that, you click on like an empty space in the canvas somewhere, then this setting here, format your report page. Let's put it back to 16:9 for now. And let's say, you can also do stuff here like change the background and stuff in here if you wanted to as well. If you were, feeling crazy, you could have some patterned background or something. I probably recommend not doing that. You can do a lot of the view stuff in here anyway. If you want to change the style of your dashboard, you can use these theme settings here. Especially if you wanted to have like something that's colorblind friendly. I think there's specific themes in here for, like these accessible ones. So you don't need to worry about using a color scheme that is might not be viewable by someone with color blindness. So you can see here it's using a lot of very dark colors and stuff, so it's easier to see.
Yeah, I mean, I'd recommend that you find out what your organization font and color scheme is.
Yeah, they probably got a brand pack, right? Most places do.
Yeah. Create a custom theme, save it in the folder, and whenever anyone produces a report, you load up the custom theme, and it standardizes everything you do. Because there's nothing worse than having 3 different fonts on the same page, and believe me, I see it every day.
Yeah. Right. I think one of the things would be really worth me showing. So I guess at the moment, something that we shook about is about how to transform this data. How do we change what we've got in here? If for whatever reason we can't change it in the database, maybe the data we're looking at needs to be formatted in a specific way in our database, and we can't change it for the purposes of just one dashboard. So how do we manipulate it in here? So there's a number of different ways of doing it. Let's say here we've got our sales amount, which we can see is an integer, but it doesn't have any currency element attached to it whatsoever, right? It's just a whacking very big number. So let's say I wanted to convert that to pounds. We can go in there, we can change some really simple information. I should be able to click on one of these columns. Let's go on the right table for a start. Let's go into sales. And let's do sales amount. Let's change it to in the format here, we can change it to a currency. You can see it's picked dollars by default. We don't want dollars, do we? Let's. I think I need to
There,
get to the
the
model.
dollar
Oh, was it?
dollar symbol next to percentage. I think there's a drop down.
Oh,
down
yeah,
the
right
right.
next to it. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, cool. There we go. There we go. Good old British pounds. There we go. Cool. So now that I've changed it in here, hopefully it should now be displaying this in millions of pounds rather than in just big numbers. So you can see in the tooltip here, it's displaying that information as well. Oh yeah, I didn't actually mention tooltip, should I? That's something I should probably talk about. So in my chart here, I've got a little field called tooltip. And here you can see I've got a the information shown by default, and there is the legend in this tooltip. What we can actually do is we can show anything we want in that tooltip, including another graph. Now, I haven't done this in a long time, so I might have to refresh my memory, but let's say I wanted to see let's see a number of things that have been sold rather than a count. Because at the moment, this is showing rather than a sum. This is showing the value of what we've sold, right? Let's say we wanted to see the number of things that have been sold. So let's do let's add in our product key into our tooltip, and it automatically the default one that's been selected is a count. So I'm going to check that it is not a distinct count. Yeah, cool. So there's a normal count. So we can see here now it's broken down these things into their categories and given us a count of how many have been sold. So for the I'm going to go top from bottom. So for the category accessories, we've sold £38,123.74 of accessories, which was 1,320 accessories. We can also see we sold, like 2 million worth of bikes, which was about 1,200 bikes. And the information that we're putting into that tooltip section will change the information that comes up in that tooltip. Now, I'm pretty sure if I make this graph be the size of this entire page.
Don't you have to make the page a tooltip page first?
Yeah, how do I do that again?
It's about, I normally spend about 3 attempts at getting it right before I actually do get it right. I think you to make that smaller and then click on the page, then go to page size, change it to tooltip. Yeah,
that's it. Yeah, well, there's a button in here somewhere, isn't there? Use this tooltip. There we go. So page 2 should now be
then canvas. Sorry, page size.
Oh yeah, I need to make it tiny, don't I? Otherwise it's going to make me a gigantic tooltip that's going to be the size of an entire page. Yeah. Right. So now I've got my tiny tooltip, and then if I go back to page 1,
and then I think you click on the visual.
Oh yeah. Click on the visual, and then do I drag that into the tooltip?
No.
It's been ages since I've done this.
Oh God! No, you got me wondering. Oh, it's down. Is it not down? Click on the visual, and it's normally tooltips, isn't it? On.
There we go. Yeah, tooltips on. Yeah. So, and then page 2.
Two. Fingers crossed.
There we go. There we go. That a little bit touch and go, wasn't it? Cool. So I haven't done it in a while, but yeah. So now we've got our chart from before showing as a tooltip on our line graph. Now you'll notice when I move the mouse around, it changes the values in our little pie chart, and that's because it's automatically slicing that pie chart based on where I'm hovering my mouse in the line graph. So if I was to hover over this period over here, it's going to show us the sales for for that specific day. That's because I got this crazy date filter on as well. Now let me get rid of that. Let's put this thing back to relative date again. It's slicer settings, relative date. So let me just delete that because I don't really need this slicer anymore. Yeah, cool. So now they should be monthly sales for our bike company. So here we can see that we sold in the month of May, we sold 10 million quid's worth of the dark blue category bikes, and it's automatically slicing the information in our tooltip based on where I'm hovering it in the line graph. So that's a really good example of how interactive like Power BI can be and the information that it can show you just by wiggling the mouse around. You haven't really got to do anything to get that. And we're getting 2 different graphs embedded in one just from a wave of the hand. So it's pretty simple.
Ruben, could you just go up a level on the line graph? Up again. What I was going to say on this is that when you're drilling down, make sure you do the branch one on dates, because it will then split it out by year and month. So when you were drilling down before, you're using the 2 arrows, which
So I
actually
had it
takes
on
you through the
all,
hierarchy.
yeah, I had it
Yeah,
on
so
all months of all years rather than on the month of that year, right? Yeah.
Which is, I think it's important for people to know when they're dealing with dates, that those two, the 2 down arrows and the branching arrows, behave in slightly different ways with dates.
Yeah. So like, because if we think about the way that our dates are laid out in a table, we've got to be really careful that we are viewing our months and our years in a hierarchical date order and not looking at all of the Julys across all years. So you got to be, it's very easy to do that. I've done that quite a few times. It's just they're done. Otherwise, you can end up looking at, every single time in any July across like 10 years, whenever it was July that you might have sold something. So here now it's back to normal again. So we can see between, specifically in the, the middle of 2018, that we sold £1.82 million worth of bike parts. So I was going to show about a transform data, wasn't I? So I was playing around with some stuff in here. We can change really simple information like date, like the format of our columns and stuff. But what do we do if we want to actually change this information like permanently? So one way of doing it is you could add a new column in here, and you could write some DAX to like modify a new column without affecting our original column, which is going to sort of add data to our data set, which we probably don't need to add. I'll quickly show you how to do that. So let's say in our...
Just hold on, Ruben. I think Jacob's got a question.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, he might be asking, maybe it's asking too much, but when you convert the currency, is it actually converting it, or is it just changing it to be, so if it was $100, it's £100?
Yeah. So it's just the symbols. It's not doing
It's
any
just
kind
the
of
symbols. Yeah, gotcha.
currency. Yeah. It's just
okay.
Formatting the data. It's not doing a currency conversion. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Other things in here, because I mentioned maps earlier on regarding the format. So there's formats in here for setting things to specifically be like longitude and latitude and stuff like that. So just a good rule of thumb is to make sure that your data is actually formatted in the data point that it should be in. So you want your numbers generally to be stored as numbers and not as a string. So let's say if I had all of my number values stored as text, then I wouldn't really be able to do any like mathematical calculations on a piece of text, even if that text was just numbers, because programmatically speaking, we don't know how to count like the word 10 or even the number 10 if it's stored as a word. So we need to make sure that our all of our fields are set to the correct format, which usually really only applies to things like numbers, dates, and currencies and stuff.
I think with mapping, it's so you have to make sure they're long and lats if you're using long and lats, but also there's a range of town, county. You have to make sure that they are spelt correctly in line with what Bing Maps does. Otherwise, you end up with blank spots. I mean, in Jersey, obviously, we've got parishes, and not only is it a bit of a venture trying to find whether it's a town or county, but also
you'll have loads of French ones as well, I suppose.
Well, yeah, you got Saint Mary. So if it's done St. Mary, it won't like it. If you do Saint Mary, it will. So that's when you're looking over any geographic area and you see any blanks on your maps, that'll be because it's not matched the name.
Yeah, so it does have an element of trying to, like Nicholas was saying, like trying to automatically detect where you are based on the name you put in. So like postcode seems to be pretty good with. Longitude and latitude is what I usually use because we've got that in our database, but not everyone is going to have that, I think. So you haven't got a very good if you just got like someone's address, for example, like I don't know what my longitude and latitude is of my house, so if I haven't given it to the council, then and they have converted it anyway, they're not going to have it. So yeah, right. So what was I saying about adding in columns and stuff? Yeah. So if I was going to use DAX to edit something really simple. So if I right click on my table here, you can see I've got some options in here, new measure and new column. So a column is obviously going to be calculated row by row. I'm basically adding another column into this data set, and I can have it display whatever I want. A measure is where I'm creating, rather than a column, I'm sort of like dynamically returning usually a single value that is going to be, rather than looked at row by row, it's only called on when the system asks you to call on it. So it might be something like count the number of times that mountain frames is in the column subcategory or something. Whereas if I was to add a new column, which I'll do now, then it's going to literally add a new column on, and I can make it display whatever I want. So here we can change whatever we want to call it. It's something very simple. I'll just do like if. Let's do.
I was just going to say the calculated columns are fixed. So not only are they then present in the data set, they don't dynamically change. That's what Rueben just said about measures. They do. So when you make a choice with your data about where to put a column in or not, think about how it's going to be used. DAX is also probably quite similar to Excel. So if you understand your Excel formulas, by and large, the basic DAX will be very similar, unlike SQL.
Yeah. For doing like really simple stuff like your if statements and counting and stuff, it's more or less the same. There are some other functions that are a bit more complicated, like calculate filter is two different functions that are usually used in tandem to do like really specific conditional counts and manipulation of the data that you're looking at. I find that using things like ChatGPT and Google's Bard is really good if you're trying to calculate, or if you're trying to get really complicated DAX, really know the answer. Then going to something like ChatGPT and being like, I've got a column called X that contains Y, and another column that contains Z and contains Y, and then have the Y write the DAX to calculate them both, then it will usually tell you the answer straight away. But there's obviously
there's a new feature in Microsoft in the latest release. You have to have your server enabled for America, but it will ask you in plain English to write what you want to do. And like I said, like ChatGPT and Google Bard, it will actually come back with a suggestion based on what you write. I think it's in the April. It must be the April release of Power BI.
Yeah. I think even in the default version of Power BI, it has like a really basic, it's not really an AI thing, but this Q&A visual here, as you see, I've clicked on this Q&A visual here, it automatically is going to begin loading the Q&A. And this is the idea of this, is that you can ask a free-form question about your data and it's meant to tell you the answer. I think it's a little bit ropey and doesn't usually work, but if I say...
rubbish, it's rubbish.
If I say like, what is the total sum of sales of bikes in Jan 2019? And it might work. It also might not. But essentially, it did work. But it's given me a number at least anyway, whether it's the right number or not. Let's have a look. And see, sum of sales. I wanted a number of pounds, not a number of, not a. I don't know. Yeah, well, basically, the current release of Power BI is meant to be replacing this system with the equivalent of something like ChatGPT or Google Bard, a much more AI kind of model where you can just ask it something about your data and it's going to try and intuit you an answer, which is obviously great for people who don't really know much about how these things function, especially for people like social workers who might want to just really quickly be like, you know, how many cases has Julie got? And it'll be like, you know, did you mean Julie Smith? And you can say, yes, I did. And then it will just tell you how many cases Julie Smith has. Those kind of things are going to be really, really great, especially for the average person who's, you know, the average boots on the ground kind of person who just wants to get their answer quickly. And those are the kind of things that obviously Microsoft are hot on at the moment. So yeah, transforming data I was talking about was nice. So I've added my custom column in here. I added a really simple if statement in here to say if the product column, sorry, if the color column in the product table is blue, then print yes, otherwise print no. And you can see here in my column, I've got loads of no's, and then when we go down to some stuff that is blue, we have some yeses. So got some blue vests, then we have yes. So we could then call this column, so I've just called it column, that's a bad idea, I should call it, is it blue? And then you can see here I've now got this new calculated field in here, this new column I've added in here, good, is it blue? And I could then have a pie chart or something where I use is it blue? I could, I don't know, filter it to all the times where blue is yes or whatever. You know, you get the point. Basically, I can. It's going really slow now for some reason, but the point being, I can use that column I just created as if it was a normal column. It's essentially from the point I've added it in there, it just functions as if it was in the data the entire time. The downside of that is that it's obviously adding another row for every single one I've just created, so it's slowing down the data considerably to do that. So it will be much easier for me to create a measure that was to count the number of blue items and return the number in one go, because then I'm not creating a new column and then counting it. I've already got a column that's got the word blue in it, so I can just count that using a normal measure. So that's a little bit about the difference between a measure and a column and what you can do with it. Obviously here I haven't actually edited the data, all I've done is add to it. So if I want to actually edit it, I'll wrap up in about 10 minutes. I haven't got too much time, so I'm gonna, yeah, and then we got some time for questions at the end of me. So I wanted to actually change this information. I can use this transform data thing here. So transform data basically opens our connected data in Power Query, and from that point we can basically do whatever we want to it. This is much more powerful than what we were previously looking at in that in the data tab. Here we're shown a number of steps that have happened since our data has come from the source, and we can from there do whatever we like to it. So the source here might be the name of a SQL server, or I don't know what it's going to be for a spreadsheet. I don't really use stuff for spreadsheets. Let's have a little look. So here we go. So it's the path on my desktop that says where this file is and how we want to open it. This navigation step here is probably me telling it what sheets I want to get, I'd imagine.
Yeah, it will tell you the sheets,
Yeah.
and then the last one does the
Yeah, it's because I
field
changed
types.
that data type and stuff. Oh yeah, we do it automatically. It'll do the default ones, won't it?
Word of warning to anyone who uses Excel loaded into Power BI. As soon as you change a name or something in any of those fields, it will break. And you'll have to go look back at change type, look at the field you changed, either amend it or change it back to what it was originally called. It's one of the single biggest problems that we have when we deal with Excel, is people changing stuff in the source file. SQL is a lot more forgiving. SQL, you can take columns in and out, you can rename them, it just dumps it into Power BI and it's quite happy. Excel is not happy.
Yeah. So here you can see I've got these applied steps over here. So we can go back to the source level and we can see what Power BI was interpreting at this very first step. We obviously told it to take a certain amount of tabs, which is the navigation step, and then it will have automatically fixed some data types based on the information that was in there. So I think this step here is automated, where it's assuming that based on the certain things we have in here are a specific data type. So you can see here this ABC123 is like an unassigned data type. It's like a generic data. And here, this is it, changing it, because these are all numbers, it's changed it to an integer. So if I wanted to, I could change, let's just delete some stuff. I don't know, let's delete some random things in here.
So Ruben, just for you, to interrupt, Jacob's got his hand up.
Yeah, go for it.
So when your source is Excel, will it always create a Power Query layer?
Yeah.
Yeah, you
Yeah,
always get
okay.
a Power Query layer for any data you bring into Power BI. Yeah.
Oh, really? Well,
Um,
even if it's a SQL query.
Yeah.
Yeah. So because
Okay.
you remember I said earlier on about, let me minimize this a little bit. So you see it opens in a new window. So you remember when I said at the start, when I click refresh, what it's essentially doing is copying all of that data into like a data layer in here.
Yeah.
Because of the way that I've imported this data is using something called import mode. So import mode is the default way that Power BI takes data from another data source. It takes the data, it makes a copy of it, and it stores it inside the file. So the file extension that Power BI uses is called a PBIX file, or commonly called a PBIX. So a PBIX file is just like the dashboard, all the metadata, and the data from the last time it was refreshed, all stored inside that file. So if you were going to have a SQL server and you were importing, a good example I like to use, when I used to work for Lloyds Bank, we had a single table called debit that had every single debit card transaction in it since like 1991 or something. So you can imagine it had literally billions of rows in it. So if you were going to use an import mode connection to a SQL server like that with a table with a billion rows in it, the file is going to try and store all that data, and it's going to be so unbelievably big, it's just never going to open. It probably would just immediately crash. So there's another type of method for importing that data called direct query, where when you click refresh, the dashboard, rather than storing the data in the file, it queries the database and then displays the information without storing the data. So the plus side for that is that your file is tiny now because it's not storing the information anywhere. But the downside for that is because you're not storing the information, you can't change it. So it's more akin to doing like a select statement and then in SQL, I mean, and then displaying the information. Whereas the import mode way is like it's saving all of that data in itself and then displaying it however you like. And because it's doing that, we can manipulate it any way we want.
Okay.
The import mode, what I'd say is if you've got a small data set or relatively small data set, and what I'm talking here is less than 10 million rows, import is absolutely fine. It's not really a massive file. Power BI can handle it. If you have something much bigger, then you may want to think about what you're bringing in. If for something like direct query, you want to have a relatively small data set or over a short period, because what it's going to do is going to make every time you change something on the visual or in transform data, it's going to make a call to that database. Again. So you very much have to make a judgment call about how large the data set is, how much you need to bring in, what's the best way of doing it. For example, direct query, I used to use it for up to the minute data where I was taking a data set that lasted just today. Whereas import mode, I would take 12 months worth of data because I'm doing comparisons to that information over that period.
Okay, thank you.
No problem. Right, so I was talking about the steps stuff over here, wasn't I? So let's say I wanted to, if I delete some stuff over here, I'm just going to delete some random things and break a bunch of stuff, but it doesn't really matter. Let's do remove columns. So you can see I've selected some random columns, I've deleted them, and now I've got another step in here that says remove columns. And if I wanted to undo that, or to see what it was like before that step was applied, I can literally click the step above it, and now the columns are back again. If I really was, feeling incredibly smart, then I could edit exactly what has been done in this set of code up here. So here you can change exactly, if you knew exactly what you're doing, you could edit all of this stuff in here, and you can see the whole path from top to bottom in this advanced editor up here. So I think this is a mashup, also known as M, which is like a block of code you can use to automatically do all of these steps. But yeah, normally
that piece of code is, I'll say now, very useful for when you change data source. So let's say you move your Excel to SQL. If you try and do it from the start in here, it'll wipe out all the subsequent steps. But if you create a SQL source, then paste it into the top of that in the right place, you can still use that you can change the connection without changing all subsequent steps.
Yeah. So we use that when because we have two environments that we work from. So we've got like a dev environment and a live environment, which are on two different databases within the same server. So if I wanted to switch from having my report pointing at the dev server to pointing at the live server because I'm ready to, like, publish stuff on the app with actual data now, then I could go in here and just change the gubbins at the top rather than having to redo the whole thing. I can just change where it's pointing at and it's going to do it all for me. Let's do discard. Right, so at the moment, me having deleted that column hasn't actually done anything to our, I was going to say lovely dashboard, it's actually pretty hideous, but it hasn't changed anything at the moment because I haven't applied these changes, because Power Query is separate from Power BI. It's part of this. Here we're doing it all part of the same piece of software, but these steps aren't applied until I close it here. So if I go close and apply, it's then going to delete the columns from my data set and probably break all these visuals because I probably deleted some important ones. Yeah, I can't display it anymore because that column doesn't exist anymore. Obviously, if I want to undo that again, I can go back into transform data. And I can just take out my remove column step, go and close and apply. It's going to refresh the data again, load the data out from our data model. Go, load it all in again. And it's still broken. Because I deleted something that had a relationship attached to it. Whatever.
Might be the date join.
Yeah, probably. I deleted something evidently too important. Yeah, it's the date one. Okay. Date key, and it was auto date key, wasn't it?
Yeah.
There we go. Cool.
There
Text. Obviously, you can use the transform data thing to change whatever you'd like. I would highly recommend getting your data in a position before the loading of your data in the first place, where it already is in the format that it needs to be in, because any changes you make in here that are applied to the data have to be calculated by Power BI each time it refreshes. And generally speaking, it's going to be easier for you to get, or easier in the long run, for you to prepare your data in such a way that that element doesn't need to be done, because it can, if you're doing a lot, it can slow down the loading time of your data, which might not matter too much if your dashboard's only refreshed once a month, but our dashboards are refreshed every morning. And I think that if it's going to take, usually it takes maybe like 20 seconds or something for us to update. They're pretty rapid. And obviously they've got loads of data in them. But if you had a huge amount of data in there and you were doing lots of really complex transformations to it, it would slow it down quite a lot. And if you wanted to refresh it on the fly, that might become very annoying, especially if someone was like, oh, I really need this to be updated immediately because I've just added a case or something. I want to see it reflected in my dashboard right now. Then obviously it might slow down quite a lot. I think the last thing I'm going to very quickly show you before I take some questions is to what do we want to do? I need to show these people this stuff, right? I'm going to publish this horrible dashboard into my team's directory of dashboards, and they're probably going to be like, what the hell is this? This is really horrible, but I'm going to save it first. Yeah, I've got on publish. It's going to ask me to save it. I'm going to save it on my desktop. I'm just going to call it test. Why not? Save it on my desktop. Boom. And then it's going to ask me where I want to publish this to. So I've never used it, but you can publish directly to the web, which is what has been done here. Because all of my dashboards are done, shared with my colleagues. They're all internal things. It's all like about the productivity of workers and the caseload of employees and things like that. I publish directly to a workspace. So I can't really show you what's in the workspace, obviously, because it's like confidential child information. But if I click on publish here, and I click on go, it's going to publish my dashboard directly into my Power BI workspace. So you can find your workspace on app.powerbi.com. I'm not going to open any of them up, but you can see on here when it loads all of the different dashboards you have access to and all of the different workspaces you have access to. So if I go to browse, and then I'm going to go, yeah, here's browsers. Yeah, and then I can see in here what dashboards have been shared with me, or I can go workspaces and I can see I've got 4 workspaces I've got access to. So I can see like these are dashboards that I've got set up for me that shows my like the caseload of all my employees, or like foster carer stuff, whatever I want to see. I can change these for access to them by going into this little 3 dots button here and managing the permissions, and then in there I can add and remove users. I think you can use AD groups and stuff in there if you've got if your department's AD groups up properly. You can set them to automatically refresh as well. So the way that dashboards are published is you get two different parts of it, right? You get a report and you get a data set. Now those two things are connected to each other, but you could have multiple reports connected to one data set if you wanted to. So if I have a look at here, if I see I've changed it from content to data sets and data flows, so here I can see all of the same, what looks like all the same dashboards again, but rather than the actual dashboard that I might give somebody access to, it's the data behind it. So obviously I don't want my users looking at this because this is going to be all of this information, and I don't want them to just see all the tables or the individual data and stuff. I don't want them to see the actual dashboard. But when I'm refreshing something, this is what I'm really refreshing. I'm refreshing the data. This is the back end, and this is the front end. And here you can set up things like automatic refreshing and stuff like that. I think my account probably isn't set up to do that because in my department I don't have access to set up the automatic refresh because I don't have access to the gateway. The gateway is like a tool that you use to allow a SQL server to process things on behalf of somebody else. But I think if you were using something with an Excel source, you probably could just go in there and set up without needing the gateway. I'm not too sure. You might know more about that kind of stuff than me, Nicholas. But
yeah, I mean, the Excel. Well, if it's just an Excel spreadsheet, I mean, you could do a personal gateway, but it's generally a manual job. However, you can with Excel Online, you can actually have a real-time refresh to the file. You don't need a gateway for that. So there's
okay, cool.
Is
that when you're viewing Excel in your browser? You mean? Yeah.
So for example, we use Microsoft Forms, but what we'll do, we'll start in Excel. We'll create a Microsoft form, and the Excel Online will be saved in a set location. You amend the URL, and you treat it almost like a web page.
Okay,
inputs, cool. And that can get around a gateway if you've got a lot of Excel, is to put it all online.
Yeah, I've done the similar thing for SharePoint lists in the past as well. So a SharePoint list works like the same way as a form, really. You add rows to it. It's like a little table, and that means you don't need a gateway either.
Yeah.
But yeah, those of you who are using a SQL database will need to get a gateway set up. And yeah, that basically is what allows your Power BI service to call your SQL server, because obviously normally you need a SQL server, you need credentials and stuff to be able to run a query. You need to log into it, and that is what bridges the gap between your SQL server and your Power BI service being able to talk to each other, basically.
I mean, it's almost the whole point of in many ways, because what we're trying to do here is to move you to an environment where you don't have to manually update reports, and you can self-serve to your customers, and that gateway is key, because what that does, that goes to those data sets and he refreshes it at a certain point of the day, week or month, and you don't have to do that work. You can concentrate on developing. So yeah, it's fundamental.
I think that's pretty much everything I was going to show as like a basic starter for 10 and how to use Power BI. Has anyone got any questions? Or if there's anything anyone wants me to show them again, or anything anyone wants me to demonstrate or whatever, then I'm happy to do that.
Must be good.
Yeah. Can't see any hands. Just keep an eye on the chat. I don't think there's any questions in the chat. Oh,
is it I was going to say, is it better maybe that we get some emails if people reply back to the meeting thread with their questions? We can kind of compile those.
See, Amy's raised her hand. Amy, do you want to come in?
Hello. Just a quick question, because I look after the school census here, and I was just wondering whether there was any way we could do some sort of contextual data dashboard that people in the authority could use. But obviously there's some quite sensitive information about children, and if we give out spreadsheets for analysis, if there's less than 5 children or less than 10 children with a certain aspect, then we do suppress the number of children so they can't be identified. So when you were hovering over the data points and it gave the actual figures, is there any way to actually show the figure suppressed, or does it only give the actual figure?
You can aggregate the data up and put a measure in that doesn't show less than 5. If it's less than 5, it will show a symbol or something to indicate that. Also, I mean, in terms of actual individual data points, the most basic rudimentary way is to hide the table, which you can go in the data point view and you can just click next to the table. There's a little eye icon, and you can actually literally hide the table. The other way, which is fairly basic, is to actually to use your counting measure, your value measure, so your value as a measure, not a field, and that will bar access to anything bar what's in the actual visual itself. And there's all kinds of things in between in terms of row level security, in terms of only allowing certain people to view certain elements of data. We hash out restricted records, people's names, all that kind of stuff. So there's all these things in between you can do depending on what the nature of the problem is.
Okay, that's great. Thank you.
Yeah, I think some stuff that we did to get around like security issues and like stopping people from saying things they shouldn't be. One of my colleagues has set up a dashboard that uses row level security, which is obviously where you're securing certain rows. They can only be seen by certain people. And also, I think there's some DAX functions that sort of help you along with that as well. So if I do a new column, I think there is some stuff that is like equals. Oh, is it principal username? Yeah, so they're like user principal name and stuff. These things return like the person who is logged in. So if you wanted to restrict stuff on the screen to be equal to you could let's say you had a list of people's usernames that you've taken from your get data page. I think you can get stuff directly out of your like company network and stuff from here. So you can see like, return me a list of all the users. That should be one of these ones. I don't know which one it is now. I've done it in the past. Microsoft Exchange one, I think. So you can go in there and get it to return like all the AD groups, all the people in those AD groups, and then you could say where filter this entire Power BI document where the user is equal to the logged in user, and then you're only going to see, or the person who's logged in is only going to see stuff relevant to them. I also think that doesn't help too much when it comes to like reducing the child data around. But if you wanted to stop people from seeing things they shouldn't do from a user perspective, that's one way of doing it.
I think it's under modeling, isn't it? The user.
Yeah, you can do this is the row level security thing here. You can manage roles, and then you can create a role, and then you can view, once you create the role, you can view the document as that role. Multiple different ways of doing that.
Tends to work better with one controlling table in a star schema. Otherwise you end up having to create multiple rules, which is a bit messy.
Yeah, you want to list all the people and what they do and stuff. Yeah. Any other questions?
First of all,
yeah, have you ever restricted drill downs? So where we drill down, so we've got a sort of a top level dashboard that doesn't give any details. We've then created drill throughs to give the details that sit behind it. Can you restrict that in the same dashboard?
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. So Ruben, if you go to your data sheet view and then go to sales, just mouse over sales, the actual, and turn the eye off. And then I think if you go back to the visual, I don't think you can drill down beyond the visual. I think which means sort of right clicking and.
Right. Yeah, I see what you mean. Yeah, when you do this. Yeah.
Yeah. There's so if you turn the eye back on, you should see select data point as.
What was that?
Just right click. You don't have it on there.
So usually when I use drill through in my department, we usually drill through to a different tab. So we have you see down here, I've got this add drill through fields here. You can set it up so that when you drill through on a page, it goes through to a subsequent page. And so we normally have one that is like a matrix or a table visual. The whole page will just be one giant visual with maybe a couple of slices and stuff on it. That'll contain like a core data set relevant to that dashboard, and then we might have a button on here that allows us to drill through to a certain other thing. So let's say we had a pie chart with a list of let me just quickly like bang a bunch of categories in there or something. And then let's put category into value.
So then what you're saying is you'd limit the tab that
you could drill through to the other tab and then have that tab restricted to only show you certain things. Yeah, that's probably the easiest way of doing that.
Great.
Right.
Conscious of time, I think we're just run slightly over. Shall we pause there? First, I want to say a huge thank you to Rueben. That's been incredibly helpful. I've been using PowerBI for a little while now, but I've learned quite a lot this afternoon. So Robert's question about, I think those people have access to recording in the chat. I think that we'll figure out a way that people can access the recording once they've left the meeting if you can't access it via the chat. So I'll catch up with Joe later about how we enable that. And I think it's probably then a case of then thinking about next steps. So we thought that this would be kind of a starting point, taking it right from the very start using Power BI, and then to sort of publishing a dashboard. Sort of conscious of the fact that local authorities across the region are at different journeys, different points of the journey in terms of Power BI, and that we might want to get into some more kind of complex areas later on. So I don't know, I was just thinking maybe what we might do, send out a short survey after this, ask people for their thoughts about what they would like to maybe cover at a future workshop and things like that, and also ask a question about that sort of baseline. Where are you on your Power BI journey? Are you right at the very start? Have you got desktop installed, or have you been using it for a while but looking to sort of take it to the next level and think about how you kind of enable low level security and things like that? So yeah, does that sound like a good way forward for everyone? Has anyone got any thoughts or suggestions about how we could arrange future workshops? Okay. One thing I should have said at the start actually is that we have the National Performance Information Management Group yesterday, so that's representatives from each region. And I mentioned that we were doing this workshop this afternoon. I saw that Paul was on the call. He's the chair of the Eastern region, wanted to attend because they're looking at setting something up in their region, and there was also talk of possibly doing a national sort of Power BI workshop, or maybe splitting it into the southern regions and northern regions, something like that. So yeah, I think it's going to be really helpful, not just within the southeast, but also how we kind of deliver this sort of thing in other areas as well. So yeah, I think Celia said so that'd be really useful. So yeah, perhaps Rueben, Nick, Joe, if we catch up perhaps in the next couple of weeks, think about putting a survey out in MS Forms, sending that round, and then we can start planning, preparing for the next workshop.
Cool.
Okay. Any final thoughts from anyone?
Yeah, just thanks for everyone's time, I suppose. Yeah, great. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, it's great to see how many people have turned up today. I think we had around 50 users at one point. So yeah, great to see such a good turnout. And yeah, big thank you again to Rueben and to Nick. It's been really helpful.
Yeah, no problem.
Learned a lot. So.
Yeah, well done, Rueben.
Cheers. Cool.
Okay.
Oh yeah, thank you much, everybody.
Cool.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye.
Thanks.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you for the workshop.